Hey everybody. So this video today is going to cover just how to find the missing angle of a right triangle. Currently in this year, so I'm in 2026, we're on page 91, but you might be somewhere else if it's a different year. Hopefully I've already marked that for you on Wayground. So up here at the top, we just have these 6 little boxes here to help us remember what inverse means. Remember, an inverse operation is something that undoes something else. So here are main examples that we see in any kind of expression. So if we're adding a 10, the inverse would be subtracting a 10. If we are multiplying by a 10, we would divide by a 10. If we are dividing by a y, we would multiply by a y. If we're subtracting a 9, we would add a 9. If we are squaring a g, we would square root a g. Or if we're cubing a 10, taking the cube root of a 10, we are cubing 10 instead. So there is another set of inverses that we're going to look at right here in our little trig ratio box. So here's our normal SOHCAHTOA, sine, cosine, tangent. Here under where it says inverse trig, the way you undo a sine, cosine, or tangent is the same way that you would undo a log. And what it's going to look like is sine, and then you're going to put a little -1 in between sine and the angle. We'll do that for all 3 of them. And there we go. And then down here at the bottom, we have 3 questions. There is a typo. Well, okay, that's a lie. There's actually a couple typos. We're going to fix those first. So here on number 5, it's supposed to say square root of 2. So it says 3. Fix that to a 2. Okay, and then on number 6, this one I changed my mind on how I want us to do it. So if you'll cross out the word sides and, so now it'll say find all angles, just like the other 2. We're going to keep hypotenuse of 42, and then we're going to change this one here to side of 13. And then we're good. Okay. So I'm going to go for number 4. You can try 5, and then we'll talk about it, and then you can try 6, and we'll talk about it. So number 4 says, find all angles of a right triangle that has a hypotenuse of 24 and a leg length of 10. Remember, the hypotenuse is always C. And then leg length could be A or B. I'm just going to call it A. And then round all angles to the 10th place if necessary. We're looking for all the angles. We're just going to call those A, B, and C. And then I'm going to label my triangle. So I have 2 sides. I have the hypotenuse, that would be right here, 24. And then 10 can either go here or here. It doesn't matter which one. I'm just going to label ABC. And there we go. So I have one angle already, and that's always going to happen with a right triangle. I have B here because it has a little square on it, which means it's worth 90 degrees. And when you're looking at a triangle, remember all triangles are worth 180 total. So if you're working with a right triangle, half of your degrees is always going to go to that right angle, and the other half will split between A and C. So let's go ahead and find A or C. Doesn't matter which one. I'm going to go A. So if I'm looking for A, I'm going to label what these 2 sides are. We know 24 is the hypotenuse, and then 10 is adjacent to A. So I have the hypotenuse side and the adjacent side. So looking here, I would pick the ratio that has those 2 things, hypotenuse and adjacent. So I'm going to use cosine. So I'm looking for the cosine of A equals the adjacent over the hypotenuse. And this should look similar to last time, but this time our unknown value is inside a cosine. Sometimes you have parentheses here as well. That's the same thing. So to get rid of this cosine, we have the cosine of A, and the inverse of cosine, to undo it, would be taking the inverse is going to look like this. We'll do that to the whole thing. So we take the inverse here and the inverse here. These cancel, remember, because it cancels out cosine, that's the point. So we just have A left on that side, but it doesn't cancel on the right side because there's no cosine there to cancel out. So it would look like this. And this should feel similar to how we do logs. And now we'll just type that in the calculator. Go here, open up my calculator. And then just a reminder, when you're using any calculator, make sure you're in the right setting, I'm going to go to the wrench and I want to make sure I'm in degrees. And I'm just going to type this in just like this. I'm going to push functions, and then inverse trig is the second section right there. Inverse cosine of 10 over 24. And that gets me 65.4 degrees. And there we go. So now I have A, I have B, and I know that A plus B plus C is 180. I also know B is always going to be 90. Well, one of them is going to be 90, not always B. So I know I have 90 left over after I take off B. I'm going to subtract A, and that will give me C. So I'm going to type that in the calculator. And I got 24.6 degrees. There we go. A lot of times you'll only be asked for one angle, so you would stop right here. But here I just want us to practice getting all three of them. Good. Okay, let's look at number 5. I'm going to have you try this one. You do get all the sides on this one. It tells us the hypotenuse and 2 legs each worth as much. So you can do any of the ratios that you want. Does not matter which one you choose to do. I'm going to use tangent, just so you know. But you can do whatever you want. So go ahead and pause and come back when ready. Okay, here is number 5. Zoom in there. We were given A, B, and C. C, the hypotenuse is 15 times the square root of 2. A and B, the 2 legs, are 15 and 15. And then it says find all angles. So I'm looking for A, B, and C. And I just realized I forgot to put B on here. B was 90 degrees, which would make A plus C also 90 degrees. So here's my labeled triangle. And then I picked to find A. I apologize, I forgot to label them here. This is adjacent to A, opposite of A, and this is the hypotenuse in general. So I went a tangent just because it had easier numbers, so I didn't want to worry about that thing. So here I did the tan of A equals opposite over adjacent, 15 over 15. Then I found the inverse tan. Remember, it's going to cancel on this side. It's not going to cancel on that side. So that gets me here. I typed this in the calculator, and it gave me 45 degrees exactly. So I did not round it because it said if necessary. And then 90 minus 45 is also 45. So they are both 45 degrees. And there we go. Okay, go ahead and try number 6. Just a reminder, for here, we're just looking for the angles like usual, A, B, and C. And then we fix that from angle of 18. It says side of 13 now. And then we are rounding on this one to the nearest hundredths place. Don't miss that. So go ahead and try this one, pause, and come back when you're ready. Okay, here's number 6. So I'm going to zoom in over here. We were given a hypotenuse of 42 and a side length of 13. I just called A. You could call it B if you want to. Looking for A, B, and C. And then B, I made 90 degrees. Well, it was already 90. It's right here. So when I labeled them, and then I found A again, you don't have to always find A. I'm just a creature of habit. So here I had the adjacent side and the hypotenuse. So I went with cosine. If you had put it here, then you would have gone with sine, and you would have had the same thing. You would have just found, well, you would have had the same thing. So here, there's my ratio. I want to find A, so I found the inverse of cosine to cancel out on this side. And then I would have, sorry, there we go. Then I would have had this on the right. And then I typed this into the calculator, and I got 71.97. And then I subtracted that from 90, and that got me C, which is 18.03. I'm going to show you one more time how to type that in the calculator, just in case you need to see it again. So remember here, we click here, we go to functions, and then inverse is the second section right there, cosine, and then 13 over 42. It gave me this. And they said the hundredths place, so that second 9 makes my 6 into a 7. That's how I got 71.97. And then I just went to my calculator and typed in 90 minus 71.97, and that got me 18.03. And that is how you do it. On your practice, this is what the scratch paper looks like. On the practice, they're only going to ask you for one angle, and they're always going to call it X. So you would do it the same way. Here's an example. If you need to look at that, you can pause in a second. They're going to give you 2 sides and X, and then you just have to find X. You don't have to find the third side or the third angle. There we go. Okay, perfect. I hope this helped. Have a wonderful day. Bye.